Welcome back to Microsoft Flight Simulator, and welcome back to the Just Flight Piper Arrow 3. Today we're looking at an overhead join at Caernarfon in North Wales. An overhead join is the link between arrival and the traffic pattern. Traffic pattern altitude is 1,000 feet above aerodrome level, or AGL, and the overhead join altitude is 1,000 feet above that. Caernarfon's a little bit unusual. It is a right-hand pattern, and because it's to the south of two RAF airfields, the traffic pattern altitude is 800 feet. Aerodrome elevation is about 14 feet, so we're looking in practical terms at a traffic pattern altitude of 800 feet, and overhead join altitude is 500 feet above that at 1,300 feet. We're on runway 25, and the first thing that we do is to set the heading bug to runway heading. This is important because when we're flying a traffic pattern, we put the heading bug at the 9 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock and then 12 o'clock positions. It's important to set the heading bug on takeoff and on arrival. We also set elevator trim to just aft of neutral. It's important not to set it too far back, as it then becomes difficult to set pitch when we are arriving at our target altitude. So we release the parking brake and start to accelerate using right rudder, of course, to keep straight. Important to set the view so that you can see the engine cowling, because we will be using that as reference when pitching for airspeed. Out of usable runway, so raise the landing gear, let the aircraft accelerate to 90 knots and then pitch for 90 knots for best rate of climb. Now looking at 500 feet as our first milestone. At 500 feet we will set the 25 square power setting, so 25 MP manifold pressure and 25 on the prop, and next milestone is 1,000 feet, at which point we will turn off the fuel pump. So I'm trying to keep it straight on runway heading. Requires quite a bit of right rudder to keep it straight. Thousand feet, fuel pump off. Now we're looking for 1,250 feet, at which point we'll start to pitch the aircraft for level flight. We will be using pitch rather than power to get the vertical speed down, simply because it's more responsive. For example, when you're flying an ILS, when you're intercepting the glide slope, you'll also use pitch to achieve the desired rate of descent. Okay, now we're looking for 100 knots, and we're looking to hold altitude at 1,300 feet. And we'll turn onto what in a traffic pattern would be the crosswind leg, but we're not going to fly the traffic pattern. We're going to join. We're going to do a simulated overhead join. So we'll fly crosswind, fly kind of half the downwind. Crosswind doesn't last too long. We're turning in 20-degree turn. Trying to hold 100 knots, hold our altitude. Being careful with the vertical speed during the turn. Obviously we'll lose a little bit of lift. And now we're looking to put the heading bug behind us at the 6 o'clock position. Okay, now with a right hand pattern, the left side of runway 25 is known as the dead side. The right side is the live side, and we will be doing our descent from overhead pattern altitude down to traffic pattern altitude on the dead side. So we'll be crossing directly over the runway threshold, and when we're over that position, then we'll start our descent. So you can see the runway off to our right. Here's what I think is a holiday park short of the runway. There are some trees also short of the runway, so we have to be aware of that. There are actually some holiday cottages on the left side towards the coast, towards the left side of the runway. So we're doing a right hand pattern for noise abatement reasons. So here we are turning. This is the point that we'd normally do our GUMPS check, but in this case we're turning to cross the runway threshold. You can see the holiday park there, just short of the runway. Fly directly over the runway. Obviously it's a little bit difficult to know exactly when we're over the runway threshold. We'll just make our best estimate. And at that point we will begin what's known as the letdown, which is the descent from 1,300 feet down to 800. So turning on to what would be the upwind leg. Again, a 20-degree turn. Runway off to our right. Still at 100 knots. Normally you'd probably fly this approach at 110. It's a reasonable length runway. It's not a particularly short runway, but certainly not a very long runway either. And turning to crosswind. So still descending down to 800 feet, about 900 now, so starting to level off for 800 feet. Trying to maintain 100 knots. And now we'll turn onto downwind, holding 800 knots, about 800 feet and about 100 knots. In a 20-degree turn, trying to maintain that altitude. I'm looking for runway threshold. At that point, a GUMPS check, which is gas, so turn the fuel pump back on, switch to the fullest fuel tank, lower the undercarriage and check for free greens, and mixture and prop full forward. So at free greens, mixture and prop full forward. Now we're looking for the runway threshold to be at about a 45-degree angle from the wing root on the right. A little bit difficult to see that, obviously, because there's a lot of aircraft in between, but we'll make our best judgment. I've also lowered first stage of flaps at runway threshold, and as we turn in we will extend second stage of flaps, watching that vertical speed as we add flaps. and also being careful of the extra drag from the landing gear. Okay, now we're turning onto base with the heading bug at the 3 o'clock position. We've got a very convenient river that points right down, or pretty much right down centre line, gives us a good guide. And now we're looking to turn onto final, at which point when we level off out of final or the onto final, we will then add the last stage of flaps. And at this point we'd also do a RBG check, which is reds, blues and greens. So mixture lever full forward, prop lever full forward, and 3 greens for the landing gear being down. Just a final check. I'm a little bit high here. I should have been maybe 50 to 100 feet lower, and a little bit quick. We're about 80 knots where we really should be at 75. And on flare I should have just got the nose up a little bit more, maybe 5 degrees of nose up to land more on the main gear, but it's not a bad landing. You see, we've got to really make the best use of the runway. So you have this displaced threshold here. Aim point, as always, is the numbers, the 25, which is coming up. Flaring, just holding it there. Could done with a little bit more back pressure, but it's not too bad. About a 100 FPM rate of descent on touchdown. So that is an off-air join and a traffic pattern. We'll just slow it down to turn off the runway, at which point flaps come up, the strobes come off, and fuel pump also comes off. So the important things to take away from that are the importance of the heading bug. That will really help. It might seem insignificant, but it really does reduce your workload while flying a pattern. And also make sure that you set elevator trim so it's not too severe, just so that it gives you a little bit of little bit of help on takeoff, but at the same time that it doesn't hinder you when pitching down for vertical speed. And also the use of pitch to quickly get your vertical speed under control is very important in a situation like this. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you found it useful. As we come into Caernarfon to park it, it's a lot of aircraft, so not easy to find somewhere to park. But I hope you found it useful, and as always, feel free to like, comment and subscribe.